Hey everyone, you know that feeling that trust is just breaking down everywhere? It's a common story, but what if it's not that simple? What if trust isn't just one thing? And what if it's collapsing in totally different ways for totally different people? That's the paradox we're diving into today.
So that brings us to the big question, right? Is trust even a universal thing? Or are we all walking around with completely different trust software installed in our brains? I think this is the key to the whole mystery. Because let's be real, if you don't get why someone trusts or distrusts something, how are you ever going to connect with them? Okay, and this is where it gets really weird. When you look at the data, you find these three patterns of distrust that just don't seem to line up at all. You've got one group that basically distrusts most other people. Then you've got another that's suspicious of institutions that are supposed to be good, like charities. And a third group, they're skeptical of big old alliances like NATO. See what I mean? This isn't just one big crisis of trust. It's like three totally different earthquakes happening at the same time.
So, how do we make sense of this mess? Well, we need a map, a way to see the different operating systems that are running in the background. And that map is going to be our key.
The map we're going to use is a framework called Spiral Dynamics. Now, don't worry about the name. The concept is pretty straightforward. Just think of it as a model for how our values evolve over time. The basic idea is that as our lives change, the things we prioritize, what we believe in, that stuff changes too. And each stage in this model, represented by a color, has its own completely unique way of seeing the world. So, for our purposes today, let's just focus on a few key parts of this spectrum. You've got red, which is all about power, dominance, and survival. Then comes blue, which is focused on finding order, stability, and a clear moral authority. And later on, you get to yellow, which sees the world as this incredibly complex, interconnected system. And here's the kicker. Each of these worldviews has its own logic, which means they have totally different reasons for trusting and distrusting. All right, so we've got our map. Now let's use it to decode those baffling patterns we saw earlier. We're going to tune into the language of distrust for red, blue, and yellow and figure out what's really going on. So let's start with red. If you're operating from a red worldview, the world is a jungle. It's all about power, being strong, and not getting taken advantage of. So imagine hearing someone say, "Oh, most people can be trusted." To a red mindset, that sounds, well, insane. It's not a nice sentiment. It's an invitation to get crushed. For red, trust isn't a virtue, it's a weakness.
And check this out. The data shows this really clearly. This number, negative 0.2114, shows a strong negative correlation. Basically, the more someone thinks in that red, power-focused way, the less likely they are to agree that you can trust most people. It's not personal, it's just a survival strategy.
Okay, now let's jump over to blue. For the blue worldview, the world needs structure, rules, and a clear moral compass. Institutions, like churches or big charities, they're like the pillars holding up the roof of a safe, orderly world. So when one of those pillars crumbles, a charity has a scandal, a church has a cover-up, it's not just a letdown. It feels like a fundamental betrayal. The whole structure feels like it's about to collapse. And again, we can actually see this feeling in the numbers. This negative correlation here means that the stronger a person's blue values, the more their trust in these kinds of organizations has eroded, especially after all the scandals we've seen. For them, it's not just being cynical. It's like they're mourning the loss of something sacred.
All right, last of our three, yellow. Now, the yellow worldview is totally different. It sees the world as a massive, dynamic, interconnected system. So their distrust isn't emotional like blues or about survival like reds, it's purely analytical. They'll look at an organization like NATO, which was designed for the Cold War, and think, this tool is completely outdated for the complex problems we face today. It's like trying to use a hammer to fix a software bug.
And this number backs that up. The more someone thinks in these flexible, systemic yellow terms, the less faith they have in a rigid, old-school alliance like NATO. So it's not that yellow is against working together. No way. They're just frustrated with clunky, outdated systems that can't keep up. Okay, so let's recap. We've got three totally different flavors of distrust. Red is afraid of being dominated, blue is mourning broken rules, yellow is frustrated with obsolete systems. But what if this is only half the story? What happens if we keep moving up the spiral? What if there's a worldview that approaches trust from a completely different direction? And this is where everything changes. Because so far, all the distrust we've talked about comes from a place of caution, right? A fear of being hurt or let down or held back. But what if trust wasn't about building walls? What if it was about recognizing that there are no walls to begin with?
And bam, look at this. For the first time, the number is positive. This is a huge deal. All the other correlations were negative. More of the value, less trust. This one is the opposite. It signals a complete reversal. But a positive correlation between what and what?
Here's the answer. This is the correlation between having turquoise values, this really holistic, interconnected way of seeing things, and completely trusting people from another religion. Not just tolerating them, not just being polite, completely trusting them. This is just a whole different universe from the survivalist distrust of red, the moral distrust of blue, or the analytical distrust of yellow. So wow, what is going on here? How can one worldview lead to such a profound level of trust across what is, historically, one of the deepest divides in human society? We have to dig into the why behind this number. Okay, so for the turquoise worldview, trust isn't something you earn by signing up for the same team or believing the same doctrine. It's something you recognize because you see everyone as part of the same living system. If your identity isn't tied to being in one group against another, but to being part of the whole tapestry, then differences in belief aren't threats. They're just different colors of thread in that beautiful, complex pattern.
And look, this isn't just some nice philosophical idea. This happens for real. You see it in places like post-genocide Bosnia, where you had rabbis and imams praying together at a site of horrific violence. Or in the UK, where the Muslim community literally fundraised to fix the roof of a synagogue. These are powerful examples of trust being built not on shared beliefs, but on a shared sense of humanity.
Mahatma Gandhi put it so perfectly when he said all religions are true. He wasn't saying they're all the same. He was saying that each one holds a piece of the truth, that each is a valid path up the same mountain. That's the turquoise ethos right there.
But we have to be careful here. It's really important to see that this isn't some magical utopian endpoint. This turquoise perspective is incredibly powerful, but it also has its own blind spots and potential problems. So on the one hand, you have this beautiful vision of interconnectedness. But the critique is that this can sometimes lead to spiritual bypassing, using that feeling of we are all one to avoid dealing with very real conflicts and injustices. It can also, frankly, be dangerously naive if you ignore genuine threats. And we have to ask, is this perspective easier to have if you come from a position of privilege, where you're not the one being directly targeted by someone else's rigid beliefs? So, after all this, what's the big takeaway? Number one, trust is not just one thing. It's not a switch that's on or off. It's more like a capacity that grows and changes. How you trust, who you trust, why you trust, that reveals everything about your core worldview. And understanding these different languages of trust, well, that's not just some cool theory. It's an absolutely essential skill for anyone trying to build bridges in our very, very complicated world. Which leaves us with one final big question to chew on. As we look out at a world that feels so divided, what's the real path forward? Is it about building better defenses, higher walls, and being more cautious? Or is the future of trust found in realizing that we're not actually in separate buildings at all, that we all share the same foundation?